Hello, welcome to my political news opinion review of major news from May of 2020. This series is where I provide my opinion on major news and perhaps personal, political, / business news from the previous month. I do this as I am a politician, and so it is essential that the people constantly know my opinion on topics so they understand how I would react to situations in a position of power in order to assist them or do the right thing. In May of 2020, news included states reopened despite the continuation of the pandemic, while the racial civil rights movement still has to continue fighting in 2020. Joe Biden's, quote, "ain't black," end quote, comment. The HEROES Act, still fighting for justice for Minden. The low census response in West Virginia. And voting by mail in West Virginia and elsewhere. At this point, all 50 states have at least partially reopened their states. This decision is despite continued warnings from the medical community. The COVID-19 pandemic is still a major concern, but due to some misinformed public outcry that included the President of the United States, governors have been forced to partially or fully reopen their states. This decision is nothing more than an attempt by large businesses to continue profiting and allow politicians to deny smaller businesses further bailouts at the cost of many lives. We must care more about people and less about profits, continuing to maintain safety guidelines. Included in the reopening in West Virginia are plans for universities to open on campus in the autumn. I want to have in-person classes and want to campaign for Student Government Association Senator in person. However, I worry about going in autumn, as I doubt COVID will be under control by that point. Most projections say that this pandemic will likely last into and past autumn. But even if it doesn't, it is incredibly ill-advised to assume things will get better over the summer, as it appears all 50 governors believe or have been forced to accept. May was a month which saw highlighted various news stories regarding racism, particularly as it relates to law enforcement. 4 separate instances in 4 separate states is unacceptable. I hope all of them are able to rest peacefully as their killers are rightly brought to justice. No city and no state is immune to this, and must ensure better training, better evaluations, and better methods of equal justice, among many other reforms. Starting with Ahmaud Arbery, we see how racism leads to a murder and a police cover-up of the said murder. Mr. Arbery was killed after being pursued by various white men, seemingly for trespassing on a construction site briefly. Security footage shows many other trespassers, including a young white couple, on the same day as Arbery's death. Due to the killers having connections to the local police department, the death was not properly investigated. A few months later, the video of Arbery's murder went viral, leading to the proper arrests of the men involved. This was a racist lynching, as no white individual was pursued following their trespassing, and it is not within anyone's right to murder a man, even if he had committed a crime or not. Breonna Taylor, a EMT and aspiring nurse who was in her home relaxing, was shot dead, severely mutilated after police entered her home with a, quote, no-knock warrant, end quote, to arrest a man who did not live with Taylor. Breonna was spending her work hours treating COVID-19 and was shot dead due to an unconstitutional warrant which allowed police to break into her home and open fire on an unarmed nurse in her underwear without knocking or otherwise notifying her beforehand they were present. An unacceptable death, which not only contributes to our criminal justice problem, but took a fighter of the pandemic away from this world. Christian Cooper nearly had a similar story after Amy Cooper, they share no relation, used her white privilege and the systemic racism of American police to threaten Christian Cooper's life. Hysterical phone calls, such as the false call made by Amy Cooper, has been used to kill and or arrest many black men, as many judges and courts have ruled the hysterical call as indisputable evidence. Amy Cooper can also be seen suffocating her dog during the video. This confrontation occurred due to Amy Cooper refusing to leash her dog, in blatant disregard of park rules. As Amy Cooper was attempting to ruin Christian Cooper's life, her life has rightly been ruined with her rightly being fired from her job, her rightly surrendering her dog to the rescue she got it from, and is rightly being exposed as the racist and animal abuser that she is. In another version of this confrontation, Christian Cooper could have his life ruined or ended by police following Amy Cooper's false accusations. Then comes the murder of a Minneapolis man via intentional suffocation, performed using a police officer's knee pressed into his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Despite George Floyd, the victim's clear cooperation with the rest, Mr. Floyd was murdered for being suspected of using a counterfeit $20 bill. Some of his last words were, quote, "I can't breathe," end quote. The same last words of Eric Gardner, the man murdered via chokehold in 2017 for suspicion of illegally selling cigarettes. Following George Floyd's murder, the 4 murderous police officers were fired from the force, and protests, including riots, occurred. These protests/riots spread into many other cities around the country. While rioting and property damage is an unfortunate outcome, it is the logical response following decades of pretending the problem was fixed when it isn't. As JFK said, quote, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable," end quote. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, quote, "Riots do not develop out of thin air. A riot is the language of the unheard. Promises of freedom and justice have not been met. As long as America postpones justice, we must stand in a position As long as America postpones justice, we stand in a position to have these riots over and over again, end quote. I feel bad for the small business owners damaged by the riots, but not companies like Target, who have the billions to repair. George Floyd's life was more valuable than all the public property and private property in the world combined. The Minneapolis Police Department and Michigan, is that accurate, State Police Department, obviously upset about the attention given to the situation and being systemically racist, resulting in the arrest of a black CNN reporter and his crew live on television, among other journalists having poor experiences. While doing a radio interview in an effort to win votes from black voters, presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden attempted to end the interview. When the host tried to ask Biden a couple more questions, Biden became defensive and said that if a voter was considering voting for Trump, they, quote, aren't black. This comment by Biden is troubling for a couple of reasons. To start with, there are black Americans at every point on the political spectrum, even if the majority are liberal, therefore making Biden's comment racist. Additionally, for most of the black voters unsure whether to vote for Joe Biden, Donald Trump is not the other option. For many, it is that Biden earns their vote or they don't vote for either Biden nor Trump. The United States House of Representatives passed a largely symbolic bill that obviously will not make it through the Senate, known as the HEROES Act. Despite being a symbolic bill, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and other House Democratic leadership failed to even symbolically support progressive policies in the bill, resulting in an only okay symbolic HEROES Act. The HEROES Act is a $3 trillion coronavirus aid package, which includes, in order to counter the costs associated with the pandemic, $500 billion to state governments, $375 billion to local governments, $20 billion to Native American tribal governments, and $20 billion to United States territorial governments. $200 billion to provide essential workers with hazard pay, $850 million for child and family care for essential workers, funding for personal protective equipment for healthcare workers, extension of the increased employment benefits, extension of paid student loan payments, $75 billion for COVID-19 testing, tracing, and isolating, approximately $50.07 billion for agricultural and food relief, $175 billion for rent and mortgage assistance for low-income individuals, a one-time $1,200 stimulus check similar to the previous one, $25 billion for the USPS to keep it funded into the next fiscal year, $3.6 billion for election planning and election security. While these measures are certainly helpful, they fall short of what needs to occur. Since the 1980s, a small West Virginia community known as Minden has fought for environmental justice for their poisoned community. In recent years, the community has been annexed by Oak Hill, WV, in the largest city in Fayette County. a move that was and remains controversial. Due to the PCB poisoning of their community due to Schaefer Equipment, a defunct mining company, dumped PCBs into the water and abandoned equipment. Despite their decade-long battle, the community has either been ignored or screwed over even more. Last year, the Environmental Protection Agency finally declared Minden's situation a priority site. Despite this designation, many Minden residents feel that little has occurred. So this is what Minden wants and deserves: a real cleanup of PCBs by legitimately certified individuals, relocation of any Minden resident who desires to do so, accountability for all those responsible for destroying their community, even though many of them cannot be anymore. Oak Hill, as the new home of Minden and its residents, needs to fight for Minden to achieve these goals. The 2020 census has been sent out, and people have begun to respond. Our representation in every level of government depends on being counted properly. If a young child isn't counted, schools will lack resources, as they didn't expect that many children. And on average, we lose $3,000 in federal funding in our state for every person not counted. In West Virginia, we are expected to have a decreased population, with estimates believing we will lose a congressional district. However, less than half of West Virginians have responded to the census, meaning that if this was the end, we would have only one congressperson, severely reducing our level of power in the United States Congress, leading to even fewer federal projects that you would benefit from in our state. Please, if you have children in your family, if you have seniors in your family, if you have people going to college in your family, if you drive on West Virginia roads and bridges, or if you want life to be the same or better, we need the money that comes from your participation in the census. Count every person that lives with you. Make sure your neighbors are counted, and invite the homeless person down the street over for lunch and let them use your computer to fill it out. Voting by mail. Also, in your mailbox, you should have received things in order to vote in the West Virginia primary via mail. Despite what you may have heard, Oregon, a state that always votes by mail, has had very low voter fraud instances and has over 80% voter turnout in elections. In Oregon, mail-in voting is supported by both major parties, as both view it as helpful in getting votes, as there is no evidence that vote by mail gives a benefit to either political party. There should be instructions with your ballot on how to fill it out, and if you have any questions, you simply need to notify your county clerk. Fayette County, and probably a few other places in the state, has had to send a second ballot in the mail, following an error made on the initial ballot. In order for your vote to count, you will need to fill out and return both ballots in the provided envelopes as soon as possible. While you may still vote in person, you should still prepare for long waits, as voting booths are to be sanitized between uses, and some level of social distancing will occur in the line into the polling place. County clerks have also said that in-person early voting turnout is unexpectedly high, so wait times are likely only slightly better using that method. Whatever way you use, whether it be out of principle or convenience, I ask that you stay safe. Please like this video, share it with family and friends, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, making sure to hit the bell icon. Please check out my Instagram at Lopez4OKill, Twitter at Lopez4OKill, Snapchat at Lopez4OKillWV, and Facebook, facebook.com/Colby.Lopez.12, which all should be linked in the description. Please stay safe, wash your hands, understand that we must still social distance and de-stress. I'm Colby Lopez, and I approve this message.